Today on Yeti at Large, we're going to talk about coping with a loss when living full-time in an RV, and we're also going to make a major channel announcement.
Hi, and welcome to Yeti at Large. This is a channel focused on making the most out of what you have, no matter where you're at. Thanks for tuning in and helping out.
Like a lot of people in the RV movement, I live full-time in my RV. I sold my home in 2023, moved into the RV full-time, and I'm currently snowbirding, if you will, even though it's a cold, wet, and rainy day outside. Where I came from has several inches of snow and degrees are in the single digits and teens. Living full-time in an RV has its very positive aspects, and it can have some inherent challenges. One of those inherent challenges comes when you're dealing with a loss. A loss can take many forms. I've heard several stories about people that have suffered the death of a loved one while they were full-time RVing, or they've had the loss of a life-defining relationship. Many people have talked about encountering significant hurdles dealing with the loss of income or a physical injury that has prevented them from enjoying and accomplishing the activities that they used to do. I got to thinking about dealing with the loss recently because I have suffered a loss. The specifics on my individual loss are not as important as talking about how we deal with it. I wouldn't want for anyone to focus on me individually as much as thinking about their own life and their own situation and some of the things that they would do or need to consider if they did experience what they would consider a catastrophic loss. Now, no two situations are going to be the same. Nobody can tell you what the weight or the impact of a type of loss would be for you. And no two losses will be the same from experience to experience, meaning they could be very different. When you're full-time in the RV, one of the things that you don't have that many of us may rely heavily upon is the safe spot, the home base, the anchor, the bedrock. My little home that I just sold was a sanctuary for me. I literally gave thanks every time I came home from a shift on patrol for that little cabin in the woods, and I loved it dearly. And it was immovable. Now that I'm in the RV, you don't necessarily always know where you're going to be week to week, day to day, year over year. And that uncertainty can weigh very heavy on some people, myself included. And when you experience a loss or a catastrophe, that can only serve to exacerbate any weaknesses or problems that you may have in processing the loss or regaining your footing. Like many of you, I'm staying in an RV resort. I've done my fair share of boondocking, and I plan on traveling significantly. But the nice thing is I have applied for and received a year-round spot in this resort. Now, the municipality that I'm in now is my kind of town. It's the right size, the right elevation, it has the right amount of water, the right amount of sun. The list goes on and on. And I plan on making this my home base. I still plan on traveling extensively and enjoying the RV lifestyle. But for me, after experiencing a significant loss in my life, having a home base and an anchor where I know that I can retreat to, park the RV, hook it up, I know that I'll have a safe spot. And that gives me a tremendous peace of mind and really helps me feel grounded, and that's important for me. Many RV'ers, such as myself, are in that retirement window. We all have significant amounts of life experience, which is code for being older, and we may have experienced the loss of a loved one or the loss of a life-defining relationship or significant impact to our ability to earn money, career changes, and or physical injuries that now limit activities we took for granted just recently. The number one thing that I think we should take out of this in preparing for and or coping with the loss is to slow down. If you are physically safe, you're in a good location, you're not on the side of the highway, and you have a little bit of time to sort things out, taking that time, a day or two sometimes, can make all the difference. Nick Cage said in Gone in 60 Seconds to think slow, act slow. And I think that, for me personally, is good guidance to follow. I know that taking a moment when things are swimming around and I'm having a hard time composing myself, having a day, half a day, 2 days to take a deep breath, take an assessment of what's going on around me and what I need and what needs to get done next, can make all the difference in the world. I spoke earlier about a couple who had a catastrophe happen with a serious medical issue resulting in emergency hospitalization, leaving one individual in an unknown location in bad weather and forced to operate a large vehicle that they were not firsthand familiar or comfortable with. I will say right now, I've done some research and my recent videos supported this, that you have resources out there. Think in multiple different angles of places that you may be able to summons some support. Many people, their first instinct is to go to the church, a faith-based organization. If you belong to a religious community, but you're in a strange town, there's a high likelihood that you may have people who believe like you do and are available to provide limited support options to create stability. Take that another direction. If you have a professional affiliation, if you are credentialed, certified, or licensed, if you belong to a union, a association, or some other professional entity, there can be a mountain of support available. My most recent career was in public safety, and as such, I was a sworn peace officer in the state of Arizona. Because of that, I had a tremendous amount of support, not only through my employer, but the professional affiliations I belong to. I could easily pick up the phone in the middle of the night in any one of these 24-hour crisis hotlines that were specifically focused for my career field and say, I've had a catastrophe, there's been a loss, I am in crisis, and I need some support. Are there any resources that you can muster to help me? I might have to move a vehicle. I might have to get some assistance with finding a location where I'm going to stay. But more than likely, it might just be I need some support from a peer. And they have a lot of people who are very good at listening and giving referrals. And if that support, if you just need somebody to hear you for a while, a soundboard with no judgment, that's a great angle to look at and places to go. There are several national hotlines and phone numbers that you can call to receive support. Now, mental health crises and crisis counselors and people who specialize in that field handle a variety of calls. There's nothing that you can do that's going to shock or scare anybody. However, we may have to overcome some personal biases talking to somebody and answering some difficult questions. Many times in a crisis counselor situation, if you call a hotline looking for some support, and it might be very tertiary level, you may not be in a full-blown life-threatening crisis, but if you are, they're available. But if you're not, just prepare yourself. They're going to ask you some very uncomfortable questions. They're going to ask you if you have any plans to harm yourself, because that's the number one concern. If you don't, be honest with them. Let them know what it is you're seeking. If they're not able to best help you, odds are they'll be able to direct you to somebody that can. We spoke about faith-based, we spoke about national hotlines, we spoke about professional affiliations. Another thing to consider, this RV resort that I'm staying in, it's a lovely place and I've met some nice people. There's appropriate boundaries in place and we do the neighbor nod. But if I was to have a significant crisis dealing with physical manifestations that I can't manage by myself, I would seriously consider walking into the front office, raising my hand and say, hey, I'm camping here. I've got a reservation that lasts until this date and I'm having some challenges. I could use some support. and at least let them know within appropriate disclosures, you don't have to overshare, what you're dealing with and what you could use for a form of support. The reason I bring that up specifically is one of the more recent stories that I heard is this couple suffered a severe medical issue resulting in hospitalization, and their reservation was set to expire the next day. And the panic that set in struck this individual that they would have to be hooking up and moving and this, that, and they didn't know where they were going. That's the perfect opportunity to request some support to help slow down. I would be astonished that if a RV resort or a campground that had an actual human being handling your situation wouldn't find some sort of a reasonable accommodation for you to buy a day or two to sort things out and or to assist you in whatever movement of the vehicle and whatnot that you need to. It's amazing, again, the power of please and thank you. It does require being a little vulnerable. Again, protect yourself, don't overshare, stay within your comfort zones, but don't be hesitant to ask for that support in those bite-sized chunks where you may need it to just stabilize for a day or two. Here in the RV resort, I recently met an elderly gentleman that was staying for a day or two. Walking my dog, we struck up a conversation over a cup of coffee that he offered me, and he told me just a little bit of his story. He told me how him and his wife had saved and planned upon their retirement to sell their home, buy an RV, and see the country in Canada. He also shared shortly after that, she was diagnosed with cancer and died. He shared the utter devastation of losing his best friend, his spouse, but how it was compounded being in the RV, and he wasn't sure what to do next or how to compose himself. He didn't feel safe driving, and he called on family members and support, and people came to help him and sort out the issue. But after the services were held and the final arrangements were taken care of, everybody returned to their life, and he was sit there with an RV that now echoed with quietness, and he didn't know if he had the desire or the ability to carry on by himself. I asked him what he decided upon, and he said, well, I stayed in that RV park for a few years afterwards. They found him a year-round spot. He said he made good friends. He joined a grieving group, learned a lot, and learned to process the anguish that he felt in losing his best friend. And after some time, he took a small trip. And then he took another, and he took another. He said it wasn't the same as what he expected. He said it certainly wasn't the breadth and scope of the travels he had planned on, but he recovered. And again, his recipe was time. Taking time and staying still, and that was helpful for him. You'll note that I do a lot of difficult videos on Yeti at Large. We talk about some tough stuff. It's obvious that I try to be prepared. I try to think about the what-ifs, and I try to improve safety, sometimes at the expense of fun. These are tough questions, and I've never seen anybody ask these type of questions before from the perspective of the full-time RV community. It's adventure, and you're out there, and you are living the life. But when a crisis hits or tragedy strikes, it can add a whole nother level of complication to sorting out a remedy to get you whole and level again. I would very much request that you leave a comment below. Share this with a friend if there's somebody who has a story or may need support. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I am trained extensively and practiced heavily in peer support and referrals. Having a conversation in this format may be cathartic for some people, and to see other stories being shared of people who suffered a loss and how they navigated that. If somebody does leave me a comment requesting information, I will respond to you. Appropriate levels of support and referral are all I'm good for. But just know, take that first deep breath, stay still for a moment, and ask yourself, what's important now? Now, if you are not in a safe location, the most common scenario I can imagine is there's been a motor vehicle accident. This is where I have the most amount of experience because I was the guy that came lights and sirens for a lot of years. Everything is scattered into a million pieces on the side of the road. There's injuries or worse. You are in a place where you need immediate and thorough support. That peace officer that arrives on scene, tell them you need help. Tell them that you do not want them to leave until you have some level of support. There are mobile crisis counselors that specialize in mental health issues, but if you have a physical and emotional health issue, it might be a bridge to get you some support, but do not let anybody leave you alone. Don't let the ambulance, the fire truck, and the police car leave you with the tow truck. Your roadside assistance can have amazing resources that can support you in this. Consider things like the Red Cross, local affiliations in the community where you're traveling through. The number one thing that you can do of that peace officer, that sheriff's deputy, that highway patrolman, the state trooper, the cop, the marshal, the ranger, you name it, the number one thing you can do is ask them to stay for a moment until you are certain. There is that adrenaline rush that happens after an accident, during an accident. And as that adrenaline dump happens, there'll be physical manifestations and there will be a real letdown emotionally, mentally, physically. At the very least, make sure that nobody leaves you until you found your cell phone, your medications, and somebody has been notified that you consider important to your welfare, whether it's your kids, a sibling, your parents. Get somebody in the loop that knows precisely where you are, what's happened, where a loved one is being taken if someone's being transported by an ambulance, and slow things down. Kind of feels appropriate that we'd be talking about such a difficult subject on a cold and wet rainy day. So like I said, this isn't about me, but I got to be thinking about it because how I address it and what I do moving forward, that's the important thing. If you've gotten anything out of this, again, please consider leaving a comment below. An appropriate share of your story, your questions, could generate a conversation that other people could find helpful. I want to thank you. And now, let's make our channel announcement. The major channel announcement is after a year of careful consideration and entry into the RV lifestyle, I am no longer going to participate in any endeavors to become professionally involved in the RV industry. I'm not going to seek any kind of credentialing from training. I'm not going to get involved with a specific manufacturer and representing, and I'm certainly not going to look for any kind of a position in sales. The reason being is there's a massive disconnect. A disconnect between the people that I've met out on the road and in the RV park and some of the people I've met through social media versus the other side of the coin and what I'm seeing with some of the channels and social media, some of the incredible frustrations and anger towards manufacturers, service, and salespeople. There's a tremendous disconnect, and I just got out of an industry where integrity was everything. I took note that recently the RV governing industry, informal body, lobbied hard against increasing regulations that would have provided a basic safety net of consumer resources for customers, the same resources that automotive manufacturers have to provide. They lobbied hard against that, saying that it would drive costs up, cost jobs, et cetera, and there might be some truth to that. However, when I see the rancor that people have and hear the stories of the frustrations with buying new units that don't function and service, RV service jail and warranty issues, et cetera, I'm not going to be a part of that. Now, I can read a voltmeter, I can fix a plumbing, I can change a tire, I can do a lot of stuff, and I'm going to continue to train. We are going to continue posting RV lifestyle and travel and projects that we do with the RV. That's the fun stuff, but it's all going to be self-contained. There's going to be no interest in working for a manufacturer, participating on a game show, or being involved in sales or service at any level. I am going to focus, though, on aviation. I've had a lifetime passion for aviation. It's always taken a back seat to bigger life issues that needed to happen. And now, at this stage in my life and the location where I'm living is a fantastic aviation hub, and I have opportunities. We're going to continue to do interesting stories about current events in history. We're going to do a lot of cooking. We're going to continue with aviation. And we're going to continue with RV lifestyle, travel, tips, tricks, and projects. I know, tough topic, not a lot of fun, and major channel announcement. If you're still watching, thank you very much. Yeti at large.